following document summarizes scenario parameters. The first thing to consider is the overall assessment of the situation. We need to consider the opponent's strength and reinforcements, the position and vulnerabilities. This is the opponent's status. We need to consider the ground conditions and the terrain that are being presented. The time constraints, whether if any is going to affect the battle, and approaches. And force status and organization of your army. We also need to consider the win-loss conditions and any follow-up actions that might be necessary. Second is the sequence of events. We need to understand this and make it second nature. This regards your force status and organization, the time and approaches, and win-loss conditions. Once reinforcement arrival times and locations are determined, we need to establish the activation sequence or understand how activation is going to occur. We need to arrange force deployment, commanders, and how to issue and change orders. We need to prepare to issue written orders and mark orders for units on the game table. We need to establish reserve locations for attacking forces so that they have some kind of assistance after the assault has begun. And we need to establish these win-loss conditions, what it means for us to declare a win and what it means when we have suffered enough that we have to lose and must withdraw from the area. Force deployments is the next thing we'll talk about. This regards your force status and organization, time and approaches, the opponent status, and any follow-up actions. We need to understand the terrain and opponent positions to determine the plans. Is the map correct? And when will you know if it's not correct? Which approach is going to yield the most likely success, and upon failure, what preparations are needed? We need to understand the enemy location as well as the location of your forces and how they're disposed to begin the conflict. We also need to determine what is the best location for the assault to begin, on either of the flanks, both at the same time as a matter of fact. And if necessary, we need to hold the enemy in place. Otherwise, he'll simply reinforce the flanks as necessary. Or is an approach from the corners a better approach? Again, the enemy has to be held in place. Otherwise, he'll simply reinforce those areas that become evident that are the targets of the assault. Or is a direct frontal assault, again, the best solution? And does the scenario have any fast pursuit, which is to say cavalry potential? And then once all the preparations are concluded, it's time to start the battle.
Okay, a couple of things that we need to point out. We've now placed all of our units, and the first thing that I'll describe for this situation about placing the units and the order of battle for each of the Confederate and Union forces is that the first thing to note is that granted there is going to be some inconsistency because again of the use of the hexagon grid with where units are located in relation to the earthworks and the hexagon grid. So suffice to say, it's clear that you can't observe the limit of one unit per hexagon grid because it's just simply not going to conform to the shape that you put in. This could also be the same for a fort, because essentially that's what we're looking at here. This is essentially a fort. They've fortified the town. It's going to be not necessarily a siege operation per se, because the time limit is not going to allow for the Confederates to have anything like siege artillery brought up to shell the fort into submission and so on, like the reverse of Island Number 10 or Fort Donelson or anything like that. That's just not going to happen. The Confederates probably don't have the siege artillery. They don't have the time because the Union's going to have reinforcements and so on and so on. So the thing to note about the location of the units is the fact that we'll simply have to assume they can be set up from shoulder to shoulder, that is, of each unit stand. So right here, we could have another regiment of infantry. There's a regiment back here. Right here, it's going to get a little dicey because we're, again, running out of room. But the fact remains there is, in truth, only so much room you can have. So we've got two units here. We might be able to squeeze a third one in there, but it's maybe doubtful. And then over here we've got artillery batteries and here as well. And again, we're running out of space. So over here we have this, well, bastion or rideau or something of a 6-gun battery. You can tell basically it's a 6-gun by assuming that whenever you see 2 guns in a configuration like this, that is a 6-gun battery. Normally all these batteries are 4 guns. Here we have a 6-gun battery, again ignoring this portal here because it's just not realistic to assume that's exactly where the portals are. A 4-gun battery here, a 6-gun battery here, a little 4-gun battery here. Almost forgot to mention it's not little, but it's a 4-gun battery here. Over here is a 4-gun battery, and right here, whoops, we don't have one. That may be because we either ran out, we don't have the models, or there isn't that much in the player's force. So we'll pretend that he just simply hasn't got that much artillery. As it is, the quantity of artillery to infantry here is a little bit, it's pushing the reality a little bit. There's a lot of artillery here for that much infantry. But it's maybe close for being the Union. Now, so over here we have, again, running out of space. And we'll zoom in momentarily and we'll get some detailed pictures of these things. Then we have these 3 regiments over here. I'm checking my view in the camera. So we got these 3 regiments over here protecting this flank. So this is the Union player's order of battle layout and so on. He's got some reserve regiments standing by to fill gaps, or when other units are forced to retire or simply must be withdrawn, we'll have to see. That's another issue, by the way. Does a unit that's at a breastworks or fortification, does it rout from combat as opposed to melee? When it suffers enough hits, does it run away? Well, I don't know. By the rules, yes, they do. The units that suffer enough casualties, when they rout, they will move back, and they will continue moving back until they're rallied. But here, there's a problem. For instance, if this unit here were to be routed, which direction is it going to route? Is it going to route off the table this way? Or is it going to route off the table this way? Toward the rear. Is that the rear? Is that the rally point? So that's the question that has to be answered by the commander, by the player, or the scenario person that's setting up the scenario, which would be me. So I would say that the rally point will be in the town. So this unit, even if it routes, it won't go off the table and be gone for the rest of the game. So all units that route will go to the center of the town, and be that as it may get crowded, we'll see. Okay, so the other thing to note is that there's no limbers out here. This is true, and this is accurate. What would happen is the guns would be set down, the limbers would be some distance away. We don't know how far. We'll assume it's a good distance away, say back here, right? Back in the town is where the limbers are. If these guns need to withdraw from combat, if they get routed, what will happen is these are field artillery. These are not siege guns. They are not fortification guns. They are wheeled field artillery. If they rout, the rules are they limber up and run. That is to say, they withdraw. They are in a routed state. They will have to get rallied by the commander, but like everything else, center of the town. What's another thing to mention here? Okay, let's move on to the next thing, and that is, the quantity of guns we talked about. The Confederates have a similar set. They have a 6-gun battery here and here, a 4-gun battery here, and way over by this so-called wheat field, we have another 4-gun battery. So the other thing to note is the the type of artillery. Well, normally it's written in the order of battle, the types of guns. We're simply going to have to go on barrel color in order to be reminded of what the guns are. So if it's a black cannon, it will be assumed to be rifled. And how heavy it is, we won't say for now. We'll just say that the Confederates will have more heavy artillery that's black, as we see here and here. These are brass colored, so these will be smoothbore. And I believe over there is another brass, it almost looks like a howitzer. So smoothbore cannon, rifled, and smoothbore. Same with the Union. We have a smoothbore kind of a faded brass or light blue color as they sometimes appear, and a black rifled, a smooth bore, look like rifled over here, smooth bore over here, it looks like. Okay, so that's the type of cannons that they are, which of course dictates their range, meaning that in order to conduct this scenario, the Confederates had to have long-range artillery or else they would have to get close. Now, if they were to have to get closer, what would happen? They would be moving across, probably not across here unless it was found to be fordable, and that's part of the rules as well, but they would have to use this so-called bridge crossing here to get across and get up into this hill and mount their cannons or put them into the trees if that's possible. We'd have to determine that. And then they would begin to fire. So obviously, if they're in a state of moving, they will be fired upon by the Union guns, providing they can get a clear shot. Over here, we also see that the trees have been removed, as have here, so the troops can be put in place. So what we have also done here is the determination has been made by the Confederate player as to which one of these brigades is fake. That is to say, the player has noted that one of these brigades does not really exist in its current location. All the brigades are real, but the location that is shown is fake. It will not be known to the Union player as to which brigades are real until they get to within 4 hexes or 5 hexes, which is the firing range for the muskets, rifled muskets. So in this example, we can also see that we've noted the brigades have been numbered. Brigade 1 is up there in that end. Brigade number 2 is here. Let's kind of move that. Brigade number, and they, by the way, have already crossed or in the middle of crossing to get across here and begin their assault this way. This is Brigade number 3 right here, and Brigades 4 and 5 respectively. And their brigade commanders have been provided. The divisional commander just hasn't been put out yet. Same with the Union. The brigade commanders are in place. Divisional commander hasn't been placed yet. We're assuming he's in the middle of the town, observing the onslaught as it's about to happen. So the other thing to note is that the player has not moved. They just simply placed them. The restriction was that they could not be placed closer than this, and in order to determine a good distance away, not to get too many casualties too quickly, the determination was made to just put them here. So this looks like a pretty good assault forming up. Again, player doesn't know which is real here and which isn't. And one of these brigades, wherever they are, could be actually somewhere else. That's been noted on the game on a map. So he's showing it like this right now, and then when we begin the assault, again, he gets to within rifle range. If it's not really there, it gets picked up and put where it's supposed to be. So again, that's the only way it can be done. The knowledge of the enemy here cannot be known because we're showing these infantry units out here. We could have shown markers, but that's essentially the same thing. The fact of the matter is there's no way to conduct this scenario without having some kind of fog of war. And in this case, it's the location of a unit. Now, again, they're all real, but the location is fake and won't be known until they get within rifle range. So this could be entirely fake here. The cannons are real, unfortunately. We're going to leave the cannons as being real. But this brigade could be entirely fake. Obviously, they can move to here, and that may not be within range, and they could remain as fake. They will take casualties, and if it turns out to be a fake unit, the casualties will simply come off. But up until now, or up until later, up until the time they get discovered, they are treated as real. So that's how we're going to play this. The Confederate player is now going to follow the sequence of the turn and conduct his movements to get his troops in their positions for the final assault, if you want to call it that. The other thing to note is we are not activating on brigade. All 5 brigades are not going to be activated, which we normally do in the game. What's going to happen is we're going to activate by region. This is going to be Region 1, Region 2, and these guys up here, Region 3. So the player says, okay, for instance, I want this region up here to go first, this region down here to go second, and this region here to go third. So obviously, the Union player doesn't have to do such things. The Union player is defending. There is no movement happening here. There's no designation needed. The player is set in place and is defending. There's no activation necessary on the Union player. So how does that happen when it comes to calling up reinforcements? Well, we will simply have to assume, using the command valuation system, we'll have to die roll the commander's ability to recognize a danger and send in reserves to fill holes as they happen, if that's necessary. We'll have to come to that. We'll cross that bridge per se when we get to it. But for now, there's no reason to activate the Union, only activating on the Confederate side. Why is that? So we have an semblance of order of how these things are going to transpire. That's the reason for the sequence of the turn. Player activates, player B activates, and in this case, by the way, initiative is always going to be with the Confederates until such a time as it is determined not to be any longer with the Confederates. If the Union wishes to conduct some kind of counterattack, they're free to do so. And in that way, again, we would roll on the commander, probably the divisional commander's ability to recognize a tactical situation and roll on that to see if he can mount a counterattack and advance troops out of the earthworks. So that's essentially what we're looking at right now. The Union is not, there's no need for table markers for this video. There's no need to show them. But there is a note to be made, pardon me, that you can see that in our previous games we have created little base labels for each of the units. Some of the Union regiments and units don't have that. We didn't get around to it. But the fact of the matter is we check the order of battle to make sure that each of the units has a flag, and the flag has an identifying name on it. So we have to make sure that we understand who's who and what's going on. So we could at some point later put those little labels on the back of the regiments so that the player would be able to understand who's who. Really, for right now, the flags will suffice. For the Confederates, when they're in this kind of situation, moving like they are, it's always good to have those labels on these regiments. At first, we were adverse to doing that because we thought, well, you know, that just puts a lot of stuff on the game table that's distracting. Well, not really. Not really. And the benefits of the organization are quite large and helpful. So we decided we would go ahead, and a lot of players do this. They put little labels on the units. Even in World War II, same thing. They'll put a little label behind the unit. You can really identify it very quickly. Now, another thing we could do, could have put different colors. By brigade, for instance, could have red here, blue here, or if they're the same division, shades of color. But for us, each one of the labels is attached to the base bottom, and then a printed label has been applied to it. We'll talk about that at a later point as well. So that's where we are, and we're ready to begin. The Confederate player has the initiative and will simply move. However, let's begin as we are right now. This is the initial phase. Player has sat down and ready to move again, but having revealed himself in this kind of configuration, the Union player can now make the determination as to if anybody has a target to go ahead and shoot. It looks as if from this position, this artillery and this artillery are going to have targets here. So we'll conduct that combat, and it looks like nothing here, but the Confederate artillery is probably going to start shelling. And over there, that artillery piece may have a shot here based on range. And I believe that's a smoothbore as well. Might be able to fire back. I'm not entirely sure. Oh, another thing to note over here. Well, it's a combined situation where we have a row, a length of earthworks. The infantry is shown here and the artillery is shown there. At this point, I would have to declare to the player, make sure that that's how you want it, because that gun is going to be a little bit out of arc. So the player might want to move this unit. It looks like an Illinois unit, I'm not sure, but it may want to juxtapose those two and put the cannon here and put the infantry over here. I don't know. It's up to them, because the infantry that advances this direction is going to have a musket fire and will potentially take casualties on the artillery. Now here's the other issue. And then we'll close this segment. The effective fire on earthworks, well, is not going to be very good, as you would assume, okay? There is not going to be a very good chance of causing any casualties from musket fire on these troops. The most that will happen is a potential for a commander being killed. But even then, it's somewhat remote. Not from artillery, mind you, but from musket fire. It is possible, but it is also going to be remote. In other words, that would say normally we'd roll the CNC dice, the code and color dice, to see if a red star, in our case, it's a white star in a red background. It's called the CNC, the code and color result. If that comes up, the commander's killed. But in this case, I'm going to have to say, it's so remote, we're going to roll 2 dice, and if any one of those, rolling 2 dice, and both have to come up with a CNC. It just seems to me it's going to be very close to being impossible, so that's a good way of doing it. We could say 2 dice, you know what? In Earthworks, let's make it 2 dice showing code, which is red. So 2 reds come up on a CNC die and the commander is killed. So, again, casualties, it's going to be somewhat the same thing. Now, remember, every level of cover pushes the, you add a pip to the die, as you would in any other situation. But this is double cover. So what does that mean? Well, level 1 is basically pushing it 1 pip on the die. Level 2, which is what Earthworks are, pushes it 2, which means it's practically impossible to get significant hits on units that are behind Earthworks. It's simply unlikely, which is the reason why you have to assault and get into melee, because there is just very little chance you're going to cause casualties in here and have these any effect whatsoever. It's just very remote. So the attacking player, the Confederate player, has to get really close to counteract the effects of this breastwork. So he has to get really close in order to do this. There's also the possibility that in order to conduct this experiment to see if it's even possible to do it by fire, that using the normal dice, or the normal die for rolling, I don't know. I mean, this is part of the experiment here, because if the player is, say, back this far and needs code and color to get a hit normally, well, now it's going to be impossible once and impossible twice. Okay, so put the commander with the unit firing. So now it's only impossible once. Okay, so in other words, you're beyond the capabilities of the dice to show a hit for that range. So you get closer, and as you get closer, you get more benefit. Well, you're going to have to get really close in order to do it. So how is it going to be calculated realistically? What is going to be the effect beyond the reliance on artillery of doing anything? You could say that instead of, and this is where we have the gradated the scale of damage can be tweaked a little bit for these kinds of situations. For instance, normally it would cause a hit on a combat from a distance. If you get the hit, the die roll causes a red hit. In this case, it won't cause a red hit, it'll cause a fatigue. Okay, so let me explain. Back here, rolling, you need a CNC on the die to cause a hit. That's going to be impossible because of one level, and impossible again because of another level, so it's just too far. So they get closer. So they still need to get a really good die roll to cause a hit. Well, what if that really wasn't the case? Because we have the fatigued value, what if instead of causing, because of the cover, the hit to be less likely, what if we simply make the damage less likely, but the hit probability the same? So back here, need a red hit, red star, a white star on the CNC die. Well, if you were to get it, because of the cover, it causes a fatigue. Something of that nature. We'll describe that later, but you get the idea. A graduated level of damage might be a way to compensate for the apparent look of impossibility of doing this. But that's why we're here, and we're going to figure it out. So let's try it one way, and then see how we need to tweak it.